Last spring, as it was becoming clear that the new virus with the funny name was going to alter our work and lives, we developed a habit of watching the daily press briefings in the office. This was back when such an event contained new information every single day, it seemed like, and our staff wanted that information as fast as we could get it so that we would be ready to support families and care for kids, even if and when the policies and strategies we were accustomed to were all suddenly rewritten. And I remember watching those and wondering what was going to happen, not just globally or for me, but for Skookum kids and our staff and our families and the kids we care for. And what we learned is that we've been developing skills and attitudes as an organization that prepared us for the last 19 months. It turns out that working with families in foster care is a great training ground for a global pandemic. We're used to upheaval and contingency planning and focusing on the people who matter the most. Semper Paratus, always ready. That is the motto of our emergency shelters. It means whether times are precedented or not, our volunteers and staff have risen to the challenge and been available whenever kids need a safe place to spend their first nights in foster care. And in the long shadow of COVID, the volunteers and staff at our shelters have been called upon just over 300 times to provide a safe night's sleep for a child entering foster care. The youngest of those children was just 2 days old. That's a record for us. Came straight from the hospital. And after a short time in our care, we realized that this precious little baby should return to the hospital where he could be monitored more closely as he detoxed from the substances his mother was dependent on during her pregnancy. That boy did nothing wrong. How could he? A confusing combination of awful circumstances and other people's bad decisions meant he didn't have a home or a family, at least temporarily. And we were called on to be substitutes for the night. And that's the spirit that permeates every corner of Skookum Kids. We don't demand to know the details of the crisis or who's at fault, but we stay ready to be part of the solution. When children find themselves here, we pull them in as close as they want and we whisper, "We'll be whatever you need for as long as you need and never demand anything in return." Another child who sticks out in my memory was a young woman who turned 13 while she was in our care. And her story reminds me how we've all relearned how to celebrate as a global community in the last 19 months. Yeah, we've learned that a parade of cars can be just as honoring as a ballroom full of people, and that enthusiasm and intention can make up for a lot of perfectly made plans. This is a skill we've gotten to practice for years. When a birthday or other important holiday is celebrated at the house, it's always fun because the celebration, particularly birthdays, they come together really fast. It feels like the plot of a musical, honestly. In this case, I learned, I think it was late on a Thursday night, that the child in our care had a birthday the following day, and there was a group text chain where preparations were being made. Now, I know less than nothing about how to properly celebrate a birthday for a 13-year-old girl, so I was no help. But Abby, Kayla, Maddie, and a number of our volunteers bedazzled the house overnight. And she woke on the morning of her birthday to a house full of balloons and glitter. My shift at the house is the Friday overnight. So, I finish work, go have dinner with my family, put my 3 boys to bed, and have a few minutes to chat with my wife, Keely, and then arrive at the house by 9 p.m. Usually I help finish bath time or read bedtime stories. But this young woman who'd been celebrating all day was in the midst of a movie marathon with Abby Smith, our director of programs. When I arrived, the two of them were pulling a pizza out of the oven. I think they'd already had cake, which you're allowed to do on your birthday, right? Cake before pizza. And then they started some film that I'd never seen, but had a pink convertible on the cover. Whatever it was, I can confirm that both Abby and the birthday girl seemed to know every single word of the dialogue. It was very uncomfortable for me. Felt like I was crashing a slumber party, honestly. But she seemed to be having fun, so we'll count it as a win. Our staff saw her and took the time to figure out who she was and then deemed that a person worthy of celebration. We took what might have otherwise been a major disappointment for that young girl and made something special out of it. COVID has changed a lot of plans. We've all had practice setting aside our hopes, at least temporarily, and waiting for things outside our control to change. I think the first time that I spoke publicly about our shared desire to export the Skookum approach to another community was at the very first Eat, Drink, and Be Giving. We were downtown at the Majestic in Bellingham, and we printed 4 big goals on pieces of stretched canvas. I still have the prints, actually, but we don't get them out much anymore because now that our second emergency shelter has finally opened in Ellensburg, Washington, all 4 of those goals have been accomplished. It took longer than we expected, thanks to COVID, but a passionate group of local leaders showed some stunning persistence as they rallied to secure a house, update it for licensure as an emergency shelter, outfit it to care for kids of all ages, and build a team of passionate volunteers who are ready at a moment's notice. It was really fun for me to participate in, and frankly, it made me reminisce a lot about the early days of the work in Bellingham. Just a few months ago, we cared for the first child at the Ellensburg house. And just a few weeks ago, we added the foster care licensing and parent-child visitation capabilities in Ellensburg as well. So the next year in Ellensburg will be about scale, about rising up to meet the needs of every child and their family from that part of the state who find themselves entangled in the foster care system. Just like all of you, Skookum Kids has become a master of the pivot this year. Education is a huge challenge for kids in foster care. Many of these kids have missed a lot of school or changed schools frequently, and it's common for them to be quite a bit behind grade level when they arrive in our care. But during the pandemic, those struggles became even worse. Every parent that I know is dealing with lost school time. But kids in foster care have that challenge in addition to the gaps that were already present in their education. Last summer, our team converted a mentorship program to an academic tutoring intervention. Ellie, our volunteer coordinator, looked at the resources she had available and made sure that college students and retired educators and certified teachers were being put to the right use. Through my office door, every day I got to watch as 2 to 3 young people sat with volunteers to practice their math or reading. And sometimes it was the only in-person instruction they had all year. In the early days of COVID, it seemed like everybody was at home baking bread and watching Tiger King. But many of you were filling out foster care applications instead because we got a huge wave of interest all at once, which was great. Bring it on. We love training and supporting foster families who want to provide the best care for kids in our area. We made quick work of those applications and trained a bunch of families over Zoom, which was new, and it's frankly made us rethink how we provide quality education and training in more accessible ways in the future. You see, we go about foster care a little differently. The Manning family, who you heard from, are a great example of how we prioritize relationships. In essence, foster care is an agent of separation. It cleaves a family in two, separating innocent children from struggling parents. Traditional foster care uses children like hostages to motivate parents' behavior. Believe me, the more you think about it, the more uncomfortable it will make you. Suffice it to say, that is not how we want to work. Skookum doesn't play any role in deciding which children should be removed from their family and placed with strangers. But we do have a great deal of influence over what kind of experience is had by both kids and the parents who find themselves caught up in this system. Our goal is to reverse that removal. Another way to say it might be that Skookum Kids is not a foster care agency. It is a reunification agency. We've had enough separation in the past 19 months, don't you think? We've all experienced firsthand what it means to be apart from the people you love, maybe for health or safety reasons, or maybe because the distance became harder to cover. We've missed each other. So we've met babies through windows and taught our grandparents how to use an iPad and converted our patios into living rooms because we've all come to understand that connection is survival and there is always a way to do it safely. In foster care, it starts with visits. Most kids in foster care have court-ordered visitation with their parents. In the last year, Skookum staff facilitated more than 1,000 of these visits. We make sure they happen consistently and safely, and we use that context to begin building a relationship with parents. Often, the first introduction is a notebook that's passed back and forth in the child's backpack. Foster parents will introduce themselves, thank parents for the incredible honor of caring for their child for a while. Bio parents will write back, sometimes sharing about themselves too and ask them about their child. We find parents are mostly just really curious about what life is like inside a foster home. They want to know that their children are in safe, loving homes. And of course, wouldn't you and I be the same? Next, somebody shares a phone number. And those notes back and forth become a running text exchange full of encouragement and pictures of kids. And then, when it's safe, foster families and parents meet up. And we start squeezing in extra visits between the ones the court tells us we have to do. And before you know it, a foster family is showing love and care for an entire family unit. And we're set up for exactly the kind of magic you heard the Mannings describe. Their story is not a happy accident. It works that way by design. This approach, in addition to feeling radically different, just flat out works better. In traditional foster care, reunification is technically the goal, but without this methodical relationship building strategy, it only results in reunification 51% of the time. But here at Skookum, buckle up, okay? Because I'm about to give you the single statistic that I am most proud of. Are you ready? Here at Skookum, families involved in foster care reunify 87% of the time. Now, despite our best efforts, there are just going to be situations where reunification isn't possible. And in those cases, like Kara's, adoption provides another happy ending. But through gracious, accepting relationships with biofamilies, we can inspire them to hope for healing, to reach for a life that they thought might be impossible for their family, and to go get it. And 87% of them succeed, and that's incredible. And it's because of you. The generous and faithful support provided by individuals, businesses, and churches all across our community give us the opportunity to do foster care differently, to do the work that needs doing, not just the work the contracts will cover. When you give, when you volunteer, when you tell others about Skookum, you are making it possible for families torn apart by abuse and drug addiction and mental illness and poverty to find healing, to put themselves back together through foster care. So thank you. About 1/3 of Skookum's total budget comes to us through a set of 6 contracts that we hold with the state of Washington. The rest, 2/3 of those safe night stays at the house, 2/3 of those spontaneous birthday parties, 2/3 of those parent-child visits, 2/3 of those foster home licenses, and 2/3 of those reunified families would not be possible if not for the faithful generosity of people just like you who gave in moments just like this one. So I've got to ask, would you consider giving generously to support this life-changing work? Visit skookumkids.org/give, and there you will find multiple secure ways to support foster kids. Thanks to the generosity of our event sponsors, the Moyot Group, Hempler's Foods, and others, the modest costs of this virtual event are completely covered already. So everything you give tonight will go directly to the work. A gift in any amount or any format will help kids and families, but pledges of regular monthly financial support provide a stable foundation on which we can boldly do foster care differently. Once again, that's at skookumkids.org/give. And thank you for joining us tonight, for your faithful generosity, and for your help spreading the word about this incredible mission. Have a good night.